okay? Well, you saw me yesterday, and so the first thing I have to do is challenge you with, this session is about identity theft, and you can tell someone stole my identity. Conference speaker Jerry Love has a coat and a tie on and is all dressed up for you. But today, because that identity was stolen and put in my suitcase this morning, you have Casual Friday Jerry. And I've noticed a lot of you have jeans on, so I guess you'll give me permission to do this. And I thought it would be okay and be relaxed, and then that way my bag would be packed. If you printed the slides out before you came, those are not the slides I'm using, okay? I completely redid the session yesterday, redid the slides, so you got a new set of slides, and so we're going to follow those as we go through this information. So what is identity theft? Identity theft is when someone gets some of your information. Sometimes we kind of think that it's a really big thing that happens with identity theft and like they've taken over your life, etc. And unfortunately, sometimes that occurs. But the reality is there's a lot of identity theft going on every day, and it's as simple as they get your Social Security number and then they can do things with that, or they get your name. How hard is that? You know, but if they can get a trifecta, if they can get your name, your Social Security number, and their birthday, then you've got a real identity crisis there that they can really do a lot of things with. Now, those of us that have practiced in tax for long enough, we know that we used to put our Social Security number on every tax return we signed. You know, so the number of people out there that might know my Social Security number is a pretty high set of number. When you go into a doctor's office or a utility company, name it. People are asking you for your Social Security number. So how many times are you giving out your Social Security number willingly to someone that then's put in a file that no telling how many people can see? And so, you know, the reality that you could possibly have someone attached to that information becomes a monumental thing. So the consequences of it could be tax refund fraud, credit card fraud, loan fraud, other similar crimes. So yesterday you proved to me that you can do things like raise your hands, etc. So how many of you have had some kind of identity theft personally? Okay, look around the room. This is not a small number. Okay, now, how many of you have had a friend, a client, a family member, someone that you know firsthand that have had identity theft? Look around the room, folks. This is not something that happens, you know, in a dark alley in the Bronx or something. You know, this is an everyday thing. And so I want to talk to you about some of the consequences of fraud, and I want to talk to you about some of the remedies to it and some of the approaches that you could have there. Estimated 9 million people will have identity theft each year. That's a lot of people. And when it's you, it really matters. And when it's your clients, it really matters. Okay. So a couple of years ago at an AICPA conference, I heard someone talking about the identity theft related to tax returns. And I'm going, what? I mean, come on. This is the IRS and everything. How could this be happening? What could really be going on there? Since that time, when I opened Jerry Love CPA in the last 30 months, I now have 6 clients, first one in 2001. I now have 6 clients that are having issues with their identity being stolen in terms of their tax return being filed. Now this is how it shows up to you. You go to file your client electronically, which they want us to file everybody electronically, and you get a message back that says, cannot accept the return, it's already been filed. Now that's the nightmare, and we're going to talk about what you do with that nightmare once it occurs. But for those of you that file other people's tax returns, I'm going to tell you, you fall in 2 groups. Those of you who have had a client's identity stolen and those of you who will have a client's identity stolen. It is something every one of us are going to get to face, and you're going to need to kind of know what you do when that situation occurs. Now, when I told them the other night at dinner, I said, I know this topic intimately because I have had my identity stolen. My wife has had her identity stolen. So I'll tell you these stories briefly because you do have a break coming up here in about 30 or 40 minutes. So I will tell you these stories real briefly so that you can kind of have the feel for what identity theft looks like. About 10 years ago, when internet banking was just beginning to start, my bank began to have internet banking. So I set my bank account up on there and everything, and all of a sudden, I had some weird things going on. But I did not see the weird things because they were happening so fast. Here's how I figured it out. I got a piece of mail at home one night from E-Trade. Congratulations, you set up a new E-Trade account. And I said, what? And it's addressed to Jerry Love, 5832 Heritage Lane. I'm 3258 Heritage Lane. This person had my identity and set up an E-Trade account. Well, okay. So I call E-Trade and I say, this letter says I have an account. Do I really have an account with you? They look me up and say yes. And I said, tell me my Social Security number. And they tell me my Social Security number. And I'm like, okay, this person really seems to have some information about me. And so I then called the bank the next morning, and this is almost a 100% response when you call someone and tell them that you think your identity's been stolen. Oh, no, it probably hasn't. Someone's made a mistake. Or if it happened, it must be someone you know or is kin to you or has access to your house and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I don't really think so. But anyway, so when I went and looked, the mysterious transactions on my bank account were pennies. There was a penny deposited and a penny taken out. So if you have any bank accounts where you see those little bitty transactions like that, what that is someone, hopefully, who you gave permission, like PayPal or somebody, to access your account, and they're pinging your account to see if they have a good routing number and bank account number, and they'll put a penny in as a deposit or a small number, and then they'll take the identical amount out like later that day or the next day. And that verifies for them they not only have a good number, they have a live number, and then they'll begin to see what they can do. Long story short, this guy took about $30,000 out of about 5 different accounts that we had over the next several days. And so, of course, by then, I'm down there at the bank saying, hey, we have this problem. They're still telling me I must have a family member or someone, doing this, etc. Well, within a few weeks, they had enough different people saying, I have a problem, that they finally decided they had a problem. And what he had done is he had put a sniffer on the login, and he was getting all of our logins and passwords, and he was getting this information. So there really was $1,000 at E-Trade. Well, that was kind of the good news, but the rest of this money went to other places. But because I called E-Trade, that account got frozen due to fraud that night, okay? So they wouldn't talk to me anymore. They wouldn't send me the money back or anything. Not me, really, the bank. Bank made it good. I wasn't out any money. The bank made it good, did everything, made it okay. But this guy was moving money. I then made it a life goal to figure out what did this guy do and where did the money go. So I began to play CSI CPA, and I began to figure out, okay, the money went from here through PayPal to here and here and here. And he was transferring money at lightning speed out of my bank account into another bank, like, up north somewhere, and then to the East Coast, and then down to Florida, and then it would go offshore. And once it's offshore, it's pretty much invisible, and you can't find it, you can't get it, etc. I had a case file that was an inch thick. I had every one of these things traced down to where it went offshore. And so FBI offices in Abilene in the same bank building that I was officing in. So I made an appointment. I went down there and I handed him my whole file and I said, look, I'm one of the several people at the bank that have had this problem. I've got all this stuff traced out for you and everything. He said, Jerry, I'm impressed. That's an awesome file. Boy, you really have a lot of information there and you're just blowing me away. I said, well, good. What are you going to do about it? He said, nothing. I said, why are you going to do nothing about it? This guy's stealing money. He said, this is the FBI. I said, I know. He said, you don't have enough zeros. If it's not like $500,000, you don't count. I said, okay. So anyway, they did nothing with my file. They did nothing to try to find this guy. The fact of the matter is, there are so many of these people doing it, and they're so good at it, and they get that money moved and offshore that you're not going to get the money back. You're probably not going to catch them. And I'm going to talk about some more frauds with the IRS and stuff here in a minute, and I will show you that it's a really big thing. So what you've got to do, you've got to be vigilant about the money that you're watching, etc. By the way, E-Trade kept sending me a 1099 on this interest. Now, it's not a big amount of money. I did report it on my tax return, by the way, even though it was less than $10, and they didn't actually send it. Well, they didn't send me a 1099. They sent me statements, and I knew they were, having interest income. So I reported it, thought that'd be fun. And so Then I started getting notices that I had unfound money. You know, finally I got this lost money thing, and that they're going to turn me into the lost money account in Texas if I don't claim my money. And I'm like, you won't let me have the money. So I finally called them and wrote them and said, if you're going to turn this over to the state of Texas, then I'm Jerry Love. I can prove I'm Jerry Love. Send me the money. And like 12 years later, they sent me the money. So I got the money and I put it in my bank account and I wrote a check back to the bank, and I went down to the bank president. I said, he's a friend of mine. I said, Scott, here's your $1,000. Remember 12 years ago when they stole my identity and got access to my account? He said, yeah, I remember that. I said, well, y'all made everything right and everything got good, and I know the insurance or somebody was out something, but here's $1,000 that you're good for. And he said, thank you. So that was an interesting one. Now my wife, someone got her Social Security number, and the best we can tell, all they had was her Social Security number. And she grew up in Orlando, which made this a little stranger to us. And a person who actually lived about a half a mile from her parents apparently got her Social Security number. I don't think it has anything to do with her parents. We think it probably had to do with the loan file or something. They got her Social Security number, and you will be amazed at how many things on the internet. You can set up an account with your name and your Social Security number, and that's it. No birthday, no driver's license, no verification. This person set up all their utilities in my wife's name. And so she was getting collection notices from Orlando Utilities that she hadn't paid her water bill and they were going to cut her water off. And so we called and everything. She said, cut the water off. It's not my water. And so we went through the process of figuring this all out, and they had set up a number of things there, and they also had apparently taken out a payday loan. But there was a guy at the Orlando Utility Company that deals with the consumer fraud, and he said, man, this is great. And he went through there and went through the file and everything, and he figured out who it was. And he said, this guy's a repeat offender. He said, we'll have a warrant for his arrest, and he will be in jail within the day, next day, at latest. And so there are some that when you report the information, there are people in place that can actually use that information to then go shut the people down. That guy was a small-time operator, obviously. And then me, I'm going to tell you that I don't think that this last one was as much identity theft as it was a scam. And so I wanted to tell you about this one in the context of the others. About 3 weeks ago, I think it was, I got a phone call from a bill collector. And they said, you know, you've got to call us. You have this unpaid bill and everything. So I call back, and the guy's saying, yeah, you had a payday loan and you didn't pay it back. I said, no, I don't think so. But from these prior experiences, I know here's the thing you need to know first of all. When you get these guys on the phone, you go into interrogation mode, okay? Because as soon as you convince someone that there's identity theft, they're going to shut up. And you're not going to get any more information. So if you want to have any information where you have control of the situation, you need to be the one asking the questions. So I said, you know, where was this payday loan? And it was over the internet with no physical, interaction. It was all done with information supposedly over the internet, etc. And this person took out a $1,500 payday loan. They paid $1,000 back within 14 days. There was an outstanding balance of $500 that went delinquent, and then it was now up to like $1,200 or $1,300 that they wanted me to pay for this to go away. Well, there's a lot of us in this room would go, it's worth $500 or $600 just to pay something and make them, go away. But I said, no, I don't think that this is, something that I've done, etc. So I kept asking questions, and I found out they gave me the name of the people. They applied for the loan in their name, or somebody's name. It wasn't my name, and a Social Security number. And so that's all they've got. And they gave me a phone number and an address where these people are in Orlando, etc. I thought, Orlando again, how mysterious is that? So we got all the information pieced together, and so then I say, okay, I need a couple of things. I need to know how to contact you. And he said, well, this toll-free number, and you call this case number. And I said, okay, I want a fax number. We don't give fax numbers out. Red flag. I said, okay, I want a physical address because I'm going to need to mail you some information. No, you send us everything you're going to send us attached to an email. I said, I don't think so. I need a physical address. And they said, no, we don't give out our physical address for our security so that we're not physically threatened. Red flag. So what I have known, and I do have LifeLock, this loan, by the way, this payday loan was supposedly taken out in 2009. It was before I had LifeLock. But, so I call LifeLock, I confirm the information with them. It's not on my credit report of any of the three, etc. And so we begin the process then, and I'm going to show you this information in a minute. There's an FTC notice that you mail to people like this. Key word, mail. And I wanted to mail it. That's the reason I want a physical address. So I said, okay, if I can't mail it to them, I'm going to email it to them. And so I sent them this FTC letter that's basically the counter reply in a legal type sense that if you really think I owe you money, then you need to give me a copy of every piece of paper you have. You need to give me everything in your file. In legal terms, it's like full disclosure. I want to know everything that's in your case file so that I can piece together my defense as to why that's not me. Okay? This has happened twice on Roz's payday loan and on my payday loan. As soon as that bill collector got that FTC notice for full disclosure, shut up, goes away, you never hear from them again. So as you go through this next several slides and I show you where to go get this FTC letter, that's a real key thing that you want to know how to use. Okay, tax-related identity theft is a multi-million-dollar business. It's not for the faint of heart. Yesterday, I think Melissa had this in her slides. According to the Taxpayer Advocate's Office, 450 cases in fiscal year 2012, 78% increase over the prior year. And the cases amounted to 25% of all the calls to the Taxpayer Advocate Office. Common characteristic of these frauds with the IRS are that the income and the withholding reported on the income tax returns are false. And so a lot of clients are thinking, well, they can't really file a fraudulent return if they don't have my W-2 and all my stuff. And the answer is I'll show you in the next couple of slides, yes, they can. What they're doing is they're making information up. All they really have is the person's name and social security number, and then they make up everything else. Current income and withholding verification process is not always effective in stopping the issuance of refunds. So the other thing I'm going to tell you is the people that are filing fraudulent tax returns are starting as soon as the IRS starts accepting returns. Okay? So this year they've already told us because of the furlough, etc., they're not going to start accepting returns until about the end of January. Just as soon as they turn that button on, these guys are there ready with the social security numbers and names, and they're flooding that with returns, and they made up what the people worked and did and how much they earned and how many kids they have, etc., so they can get the fraudulent tax refund back. The IRS is trying to develop a new program that's scheduled to be phased out in 2015. This is a tax conference, and for all of you preparing tax returns, let me tell you now, I have a crystal ball. 2015 and 16 is going to be hell. It's going to be bad. Whatever they do to fix this problem is going to come down to making our life more miserable, slowing the system down or something. Because in reality, most of us don't do these people's returns that come in January and want their refund done immediately, okay? That's the earned income crowd, that's the H&R Block group, etc. So that's generally not our clientele, okay? But those people, the way we would stop this, as I show you in the next couple of slides, is that if we would slow down that they can't file that return until the information is in the computer from the Social Security Administration and they could do a matching, then it would be better. That would basically mean that no refunds are issued until May, maybe June, okay? And so I've said it here in Kansas City and maybe for the first time, and I will tell you the government can't do that because of the backlash of the people who want those quick refunds, etc. But if they really wanted to shut this thing down and curb the loss to the IRS and to us as taxpayers, they would slow refunds down, particularly on those with earned income credits and the refundable credits, until sometime like June. Okay, IRS identity theft is a cottage industry. There are people who are making a bunch of money. This one person, as I'm showing you here on the slide, filed 5,500 tax returns. How many people in this room file 5,500 tax returns a year? I mean, what in the world does he have? How many people does he have? And how big of the computer and just think about it. what it's taken for him to generate those. And I'll tell you the other thing, because of the type of income they're getting back on it, etc., they did that in a matter of a month or two, because they did that well before your client was trying to file their tax return timely, maybe at the end of March or so. There's a single address in Bulgaria. Warning, IRS, if you're listening to this tape, quit sending refunds overseas until you can verify some information about them. Okay, second thing, CSI CPA, room full of people here. You're not hard to figure this one out. How many tax returns would you expect a single address to file? IRS computer, match it up. You know, if there's an address here that's getting a whole bunch of refunds, some flag ought to go off, you know, and say, you know, overload, something's going wrong here, okay? And I couldn't find, I know there's a case out there that there's a prisoner, and I think it's up north, Indiana, Illinois, somewhere up in the upper north here, that there's a prisoner was filing 300 and 400 tax returns. Okay, how hard would it be to program into the IRS computer all the prisons in America? And if there's a prisoner asking for a refund, hold it up, June, July, something, figure out if it's a good return. And then if there's, you know, one particular sale, I don't know how you get to mail in prison, haven't been there. But, you know, there should be some way you could at least figure out if we're sending refunds to the prisons, stop. Earned income credit. God bless Congress. Do you remember when the earned income credit came out? They determined we were not doing a good enough job of informing our clients that they might have the earned income credit, so they threatened to punish us and penalize us if we weren't educating our clients and helping them get the earned income credit. Pendulum swings. Now we have fraudulent earned income credit filing. And if you and I make a mistake on an earned income credit claim, we can get fined $500 for having done that mistake and on that return, okay? You got people out here, they're just cranking these puppies out. The refundable credit, note to Congress, refundable credits is part of your problem. And when you have a transfer of wealth through the tax code system, you've created your own cottage industry where people are doing this so that they can get the money back. This guy is from the IRS Press Releases. Obviously, none of this is information I would have to share confidentially. Joe Torres from the Bronx ran a team. Obviously, he ran a team. Filed 8,000 tax returns, totaling $65 million in refunds. Now, I don't know in his case whether they were all going to a common address or something, but think about it for a minute. When I said refunds going to a common address, the younger generation knows that I'm a baby boomer, and they're like, oh, the old guys are talking about someone actually gets a check. You don't have a check anymore. You have a debit card that they load the money with, or a bank account. So that's the way these guys are doing so many of this, is they're having the money come in, and it's not saying like it's this particular address somewhere, so it's even a little harder for the IRS to track in that regard. And because they're using the multiple debit card type things, then they've got something that they're thinking they're circumventing the next thing I just said, and that is have some kind of, you know, code that says when we have a particular bank account getting a lot of refunds, then shut that bank account down, okay? So that's part of the problem that we have there, which might bring the question to the table, should Congress, should the IRS be sending refunds in that way? One single address in Michigan filed 2,137 returns claiming $3.3 million in refunds. I still think that the address crisscross would be a way to help figure out, because if you've got one address filing a bunch of returns, then you could have a problem there. Over 100 million income tax refunds to process this year. The IRS concedes it can never, you know, solve the problem entirely. Now, when you get that letter, and that's how you will get it. You'll get a letter, or first of all, you'll get it kicked back on the IRS accepting your return. I use LaCert. So my message back from LaCert comes and says, return rejected, return's already been filed. Then what we do is we immediately call the IRS and we say, we have an identity theft problem because I know this is the client, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I always call the taxpayer practitioners hotline, and I get someone that has an idea. Sometimes they transfer me to the identity theft unit, sometimes they don't. But you're going to tell them what your problem is, and you're going to begin this process. Now, they're rapid about these refunds, and they're going to get these refunds out to the thieves in a hurry. Your poor client that has the legitimate refund, they just got on the slow track. And so when you've got the client that's got a refund that they're really desperate for, hope it's not that client, because it's going to take a year. And this is this is not my information. This is from the IRS. But I can tell you this tracks with what we've seen in our practice, is that once this thing hits, and once you let the IRS know you have an identity theft problem and you start going through the paces, it's going to slow everything down. The good news is you will get to the other end. They will get a PIN. You will have a way to file the return electronically in the future, and it'll be okay going into the future. But this year, the year of the identification that you have an identity theft, you're going to slow this whole process down, and it's going to take a while, and you're going to have to be sending some information in. The most current client that I had do this was a dentist, and it was a rather entertaining call. Actually, the clients actually thought it was an entertaining phone call. I get the person on the phone, and they're like, the IRS person, and they say, yeah, okay, I understand you think you have identity theft, etc. Is this couple having marital problems? I said, what do you mean? Was there any possibility that the spouse already filed the return? I said, no, that's not the case. They're very happily married, and I know that's okay. But, you know, it's just like what I tell you when you call the bank or whoever else and you say I have an identity theft. Be prepared for those off-the-wall challenges and questions that you have as to why this is happening, and just continue to work through the issue and say, you know, give them the information, etc. By 2012, they have 3,000 people in the unit assigned just to this issue. That's over double what it was before. They've got 35,000 other people throughout the IRS that are trained to begin to handle these issues and understand what they are, etc. So the good news to that is that when you call the practitioner's line, or if you call the identity theft people, etc., you're going to have some people that have some idea what you're talking about and help you work through it. So, how do criminals engage in identity theft? Well, the low brow ones, maybe you're dumpster diving and they're getting stuff from there, etc. So like in terms of credit cards, etc., everyone needs to have a shredder, and when you get those pre-approved loans, etc. in the mail, you need to shred those, etc. In fact, I said that mine happened 10, 12 years ago. Reality is the first time I had my identity theft stolen was 10 years after my divorce, and it was by my ex-wife. She got one of those pre-approved credit cards in the mail, and she filled it out, signed my name, and got a credit card for her and was using it. And I found it out because I got my credit report, and there's a credit card on there I don't know anything about. So I call the bank in Tempe, Arizona, and say, you know, what is this? And say, yes, Mr. Love, you have a credit card with us. I said, I don't think so. And so I convinced him that I really didn't. He said, okay, here's what you do. You take a white piece of paper and you sign your name 3 times and you fax it to me. I said, okay. So he got that because he said he had a signed application for this credit card. And so he calls me back 15 minutes later and he said, you're correct, that's not your signature on the application. And so I said, okay, is this going to this address that's in this information? He said, yes, it is. I said, that's my ex-wife. And he said, okay, well, we'll shut this credit card down and we'll go from there. And he said, by the way, have you had other problems with her about that? I said, I've had a few problems with her messing with credit and stuff since the divorce. And he said, well, she may have hit the gold mine for you on this one because this was done by mail. She has now committed mail fraud, and all you need to do is walk across to the post office and ask for the postmaster and turn this information in, and then they will begin an investigation for mail fraud. I did that, and guess what? My ex-wife quit opening credit cards in my name. So, if it's done by mail, you've got an out there that would help. Sometimes it's online hacking, malware, etc., stealing mail from your purses or whatever, direct contact with trusting victims, etc. Okay, I asked Randy Johnson about this, and I told him I was going to call him out on this, but then he answered the question for me, so he can verify later if you're not sure that I've got all these facts right, is there are credit cards now that allow you to not have to have it physically swiped through the machine, okay? And the ones I've seen the most are at the gas pump. Exxon has it, the quick pay. You walk up there and you scan your wallet or anything near that spot, and then it does your credit card, etc., and then you've paid for your gas, etc. I think Starbucks has some devices for that, etc., and it's for convenience and speed, etc. Those devices are the easiest and fastest way for someone to get your credit card information. And just by me walking around this room, if I walked around the room like a politician working all the tables, then every one of you that have one of those in your purse or your wallet, I will have had that information and be able to walk out of here. I didn't even have to shake your hand. I didn't have to touch your purse or your wallet. All I had to do was, Randy, on the quick pay type things like that, I only have to be 18 inches, 24 inches. On a credit card, you got to be closer, and it needs to be a single credit card in your wallet, okay? So I asked Randy, I said, because I was thinking that the whole thing was a little bit bunk, and he said, no, it's not just the swipe and pay, it's any credit card. So if you get within 12 inches or so of me, I usually carry my wallet in my front pocket, you could be picking up the information on my regular credit card. I said, Randy, but I think I've understood that my best defense against that is, now guys, I'm sorry, but when you tell your wife how to solve this problem, you may not like the answer. When you put multiple credit cards side by side, then that signal that's trying to pick it up is getting 3 signals at once, and it gets scrambled and confused, okay? So instead of having to go buy a special wallet that's got the thing on there, if you have multiple credit cards and you got them there stacked, so the scanner would be trying to read 3 credit cards, plus my Admirals Club and my American Airlines card and my Hilton card, etc. So what you need to do is, if you're carrying that information, now this is not just your garden variety hacker. This is someone that's got something, it could be on an iPhone or something, but they've got something that could read that information. So if you have multiple things there, then it would help you avoid that problem. They're called radio frequency identification, those scan pay cards, and if you've got those, you're more vulnerable for someone to scan that information and get it. So what can you do to protect yourself? Number 1, everybody needs to have a shredder. Did I say that yet? Everybody needs to have a shredder. Now, lesson learned from Arthur Anderson, be careful what you shred and while you're shredding it. But stuff like this, if it's got your Social Security numbers and credit cards and stuff like that, the applications you get in the mail, pre-approved of credit cards, shred that stuff and get rid of that stuff. Be skeptical. As I said a minute ago, you've got people all over the place asking for your Social Security card, your Social Security number. So if someone's asking you for your Social Security number, be skeptical and say, why do you need my Social Security number? And if they're saying, well, that's how we give you a number, then say, I'm going to make up a number that's that long and give to you, but I'm not going to give you my Social Security number. And so, you need to determine who really needs it. Deal only with reputable people. Don't carry your Social Security card around with you. There's really no need to. You don't need it that often. Most of us in the room probably have that number memorized anyway, so you could come up with that. And then there's some information on the Federal Trade Commission site talking about using and securing your information. You should be checking your credit frequently. That's how I've found several of the items that have come up in our case, so in my personal case. So you need to be checking your credit. You can get it free every 12 months by asking for it, but at least once a year. And you should be educating your clients and all your family members and everybody. You need to be getting your credit reported. You need to be looking on it. If you really, really, really want to be vigilant about it, get all 3. Sometimes there's something on one of them that's not on the other, but you need to either get a consolidated of the 3 reporting agencies, or you need to be getting them individually. Check your bank statement. I'm in front of a bunch of CPAs, and I hope I don't have to preach this. But I can tell you, my wife reconciles her bank account every 10 years, whether she needs to or not. I look at her bank statement and her bank account every month so I can see if there's any suspicious activity on it. There are people who don't do this. You need to be looking at it. Now, For the baby boomers, since I figured out there's a whole bunch of you in the room and there's not too many Gen Y, when I talk to Gen Y, well, by the way, in my firm of 10 people, there's 3 of us are baby boomers, my wife, my sister who's a CPA, and myself. All 7 others are Gen Y. So I'm telling you, I live this. Gen Y does not reconcile a bank account. And if you ask them to reconcile a client's bank account when they're straight out of school, they go, what? And so you have to show them how to reconcile a bank account. They're not accustomed to that. You know why? Debit cards. There's no outstanding checks. So what would you reconcile the account to? And so the concept of checking it, but I'll also tell you they're online checking their account pretty frequently, so they may be better off than those of us that think we actually get a paper statement and that means something. But look at your bank statement and look at it frequently and make sure that you know the transactions on. Also look at your credit card statements. If you got activities on there, one time I stayed at a hotel in Lubbock. The next day I get a call from my credit card Citibank saying, are you buying a computer in Arlington today? I said, no. And they said, well, someone's got your credit card buying a computer in Arlington. So pay attention to those information about what's happening on your credit card, et cetera, suspicious activity. The other thing that I'll tell you I'll do is that when I get an email or a text or a phone call that says that I need to call about suspicious activity on my credit card, I do not reply. I do not reply to the email. I do not reply to the text. I do not call the number they leave. I pick up my wallet. I look on the back of my Citibank card. I call the number on the back of my card. Because there are people who have figured out that if you have been told you have suspicious activity, you'll give them all kinds of information on the phone that then will allow them to do more things with your information. On your computer, make sure that you have firewalls, anti-spam, and virus software, and it's operational, and you figure out what you're doing with it. I did not do this yesterday. Randy would know how to do this. For all of these people over here sitting on this side of the room that are on the hotel's Wi-Fi, if you don't have this stuff, we could be looking at everything on your computer while you're sitting there because you're on the same Wi-Fi we are. And if you don't have a locked door between your information and me, I can be looking at what you've got. My cell phone's back there in my briefcase. All of you that have iPhones and iPads, we can see you. And so if you don't have something to protect your private information that's on those wireless devices, Wi-Fi devices, just know that you've got an open door to your vault of information. Now, this last item on here, I'm glad Roz did not come with me, my wife, today, because if I said this in front of her, she'd have a fit. She'd get up on the stage and tell all y'all how I'm over-exuberant or something. You need to change your passwords frequently. I've got a slide here to make some suggestions about your passwords. Randy would verify for you. Your password can be hacked. Someone can figure out your password. It's going to take them a while, but there's programs that they can figure it out. So the way you protect yourself against that is you change your password frequently. There are some sites, like the Social Security Administration site I told you about yesterday, require that I change my password every 6 months. E-Services with the IRS requires that I change my password every something. I forget, is it 6 months or something? So even those sites understand the value of changing the password. In a seminar 2 weeks ago, the IT guy said you ought to change your passwords, all of them, every 30 days. I think I had a slide in here. I've got over 200 passwords. You know how long that would take me to change all those? So the recommendation is you divide your passwords between non-critical things like subscriptions and things you read, et cetera, and those that contain money and information that's key to you. If you identify that you've had identity theft, report it. Here's the site to the FTC. This is your key right there. You get on that website right there with the identity theft thing. It's got a sample letter that you would send to these bill collectors, et cetera, where you think that they're trying to collect for something that was fraudulently created. And that's the FTC letter that I have found to be very effective to shut them down and send them on. Spam at ace.gov is an email for you to report the identity theft, and so that the FTC has a division that's gathering that information, and what they're looking for is clusters where there's a lot of things happening at one particular place. Identity theft. U.S. Postal System notify them. Notices with the IRS immediately. This is the Specialized Identity Theft Program. I will tell you that like when the shutdown was, I have sometimes found that it's harder to get through there because there's so many calls. So sometimes if I get in there and it seems like I'm not going to get through, then I call the practitioner's line. Sometimes they can take the information for me. Sometimes they transfer me back over here. The form number here, 14039. Notice that's not a normal 4-digit number of the IRS, so I don't know, maybe that was on purpose. That's the form you're going to have to fill out to send into the IRS to document that your client has had their identity stolen. The good news is I can tell you from all the phone conversations that I've had and all the clients that I've had, the IRS is taking a strong position that the right, correct taxpayer is not going to be penalized for this. And if your little client has a refund, they're going to get the refund, so they're not going to be the one paying the price for someone having filed the other return. So, actions CPAs can take: educate your clients, be proactive to let them know about it. Tell clients that the IRS never uses email. How many of y'all have gotten the emails and scams that are saying, I'm the IRS and send me information, etc.? Continue to educate your clients about that. Even when you try to go get a federal ID number, there's some other sites, some which are for-profit sites that want to get your ID number for you and charge you $25 or $50 or something to get it for you. You can get it for free. They can get it for free. So you don't need to be going through those. But make sure you're at irs.gov and not one of those others. If you have, the IRS has a site for top tips about identity protection. Actually got some pretty good stuff on there. I'm going to run through these because you can go to those sites and read those yourself. They've got some publications that you can also use and read. Best practices from secureflorida.org. Have a strong password, 15 characters long. Many sites say it's got to be a minimum of 6 or 8 or something, but the recommendation is that it's longer. The longer it is, the harder it is for the programs to hack your number and get it. It needs to be a combination of letters and numbers and punctuation. And the frustrating thing about this is that not everybody's password software does the same thing. Some you can't use a particular symbol, some you have to use particular symbols, etc. So you kind of have to know what you've got to look at for in there. That's part of the frustration. Personally, I can't have all my passwords without having a password program to keep up with them. A strong password's important. Never use the things like your birthday, social security, of course not your social security number, phone numbers, etc. Here's how to create a password. It talks you through some things. Make a sentence, something that you could remember. Here's an illustration. Ann and Bob have 3 fine children named Jason, Paul, and Elizabeth, and that's translated into that password at the top. So by doing that, you've got something that might be easy to remember. And again, as I said, I think it's on this slide that you identify your passwords between ones that are accessing money and secure information versus things like subscriptions, etc. And then you use those. I have over 200 passwords. It's tough. If you're a system administrator, okay, this is one that I really have difficulty with. If I really want, Roz and I have been married 31 years. We've remodeled the house twice. Our marriage has survived all of that kind of stuff. But me telling her she's got to have a secure password and change it frequently is, oh man, big, friction there. So, but from the office standpoint, you need to have security on your network at the office, and you need to have people not using things like at the bottom, Enterprise 1, 2, and 3, etc. You need to have antivirus software. You need to be scanning your system and your network for malware. Maybe Randy's going to talk about that some more. You need to install the security patches. Watch out for frauds and scams, and listen for the phone calls that you get. The mobile devices, I talked about that a minute ago. So if you've got any other questions, you're welcome to email, you're welcome to call me. I thank you for inviting me and allowing me to come, and I have a great time coming. And thank you, Mary. Thank you, Marlene.